Welcome to Fandom Power.
Hey, welcome back to Fandom Power and our ongoing series on Season 2 of The Mandalorian. This week, it's week 3. So what are we looking at here? Chapter 11, The Heiress. And oh my god, there is a lot to consume today. So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to get right back into it. Once again, I'm here with producer Andy and friend of the show, Hank. Gentlemen, what did we think of The Heiress?
Not bad at all.
Oh my god.
I felt very much the same.
You were saying like a couple shows ago that you could gauge the thing by how you were smiling.
Yeah.
And I was like a Cheshire cat. It was like, again, I watch it like 4 a.m. my time.
Yeah.
Just to be on the cutting edge. And dude, it's hard not to wake the neighbors at 4 a.m. when there's something like that going on.
As we were coming down to the studio today, I turned to Andy and I said, listen, I know we've talked about the whole, like, my note-taking style and is it the detractor from the show format? And once again, I'm like, how is it that the shortest episode of the series has generated the most note-taking that I've ever done?
No, it's certainly. I never wrote this much in high school. If I did, I would have done far better.
Yeah.
But they jammed so much in this week.
Yeah, there is a lot
deep.
of...
There's a lot of nuanced, subtle stuff, story stuff, acting stuff, just physicality to character. There's so much packed into this.
Lots of lore. So for our listeners, for you Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels fans, you know where this is going. But for the casual listener, we're going to touch on some of that lore stuff that you might not be up to speed on. So let's kick this one off. The Heiress. It's again written by Jon Favreau. This time around, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. So I think this is her second episode of the series. Total runtime, 35 minutes and 22 seconds, and that includes the recap. So I think if you knock that out, we're closer to about 32 minutes, I think. And
That's a fair assumption, yeah.
Just a brief episode synopsis this time. It's a one-liner. The Mandalorian braves high seas and meets unexpected allies. So... yeah, what an interesting episode. We have this opening scene, and it's we talked about this last week about, is this the scene from the trailer? And I'm pretty sure that the opening scene of this episode is the trailer shot of the Razor Crest limping past Caliban on its way into Trask. Yeah. Yeah, so Din, the child, and Frog Lady are sleeping in the cockpit, and once again they are raised by an alarm. And this week's edition of Did You Get the Orabesh? What do you got? Anything?
No, you got me this time.
Okay.
I'm going to quit my day job. You keep screwing around.
Oh
like
my God. You know what, though? So I'm going to, just to go on a side here about the Orabesh, like there is so much in there in this episode that I just couldn't get it all because even on a 4K TV, the resolution on a lot of it is still so... either the script is so small or the resolution just isn't there that I can only get the largest fonts. So this time we get a message saying stabilizer error, and it becomes this sort of tense moment where you're anticipating the landing, or I guess in this case a controlled crash.
Yeah, and it's cool. For the first time you get to see, they never really delve into the science, but so you get to see that there's a piece of tech here at work on every starship that calculates the perfect entry into a planet, because we see Luke fly into Dagobah.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah,
Han Solo fly, through the clouds of Bespin to the Cloud City. We see a lot of ships approach planets without burning up. But there is a precedent, though, in Revenge of the Sith when the Grievous's ship is crashing and Anakin's flying up. So there is a precedent for that, but it's neat for them to cite a piece of tech.
Yeah, he refers to it as the landing array. The landing array isn't responding.
Yes.
Which means it's going to be a manual reentry. So, I mean, seeing the Razor Crest, and I'm like, oh my God, seeing all of the flappery and the flim-flam, flotsam and jetsam just hanging off the ship, I'm like, it's gonna rip apart.
I'm reminded more and more every episode of how much the Crest is like the Falcon in terms of its character.
Oh yeah, it's very quickly becoming it is its own character.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we get this the re-entry, the burn shot where, I mean, you can't see through the heat and the fire coming off, and I think he makes a comment about having just enough fuel once they break the atmosphere to slow their descent and stick the landing, as it were.
And that's a cool thing. It leads back to the Solo film, the idea that fuel is a limited resource and is sort of coveted in the galactic society.
I have to say, I like that aspect of it because
so do I. They never touched on it in the original trilogy. Like, blasters are limitless, jetpacks are limitless, ships can go anywhere, and it's kind of new. Like scarcity is nice. It creates,
I mean,
reason and tension.
In terms of the old role-playing games, there was that stat block on every starship that was just lumped under consumables. And I suppose fuel kind of falls into that, but I never really associated it until now.
No, exactly.
I always thought of it as like, food and like other consumables. Yeah, toilet paper or whatever.
Certainly.
Essentials.
I agree. Yeah.
So we get treated to another little blurb of Aurebesh, and this one is kind of a bit of a head scratcher because it says landing gear offline, but that turns out to be only half true because in the landing itself, the landing gear actually do deploy. But there's a few other things going on here, and one of them is there's this vector diagram of the planet with a hexagonal landing indicator where the landing zone is, and I was doing a little bit of reading prior to the show, and some of these other entertainment outlets really are stretching at what I think, what they're calling an Easter egg. But one entertainment outlet referred to that as an Easter egg, referring to the Death Star because of the vector graphic with
because it was a circle with a circle in it.
The hex kind of indicated the dish.
I also know a lot of these other formats, and I've been frequenting them lately just to check it out, and they're taking their time. They're spreading information out over the week and just dropping like a 3-second I noticed that this guy had a red shirt on.
Yeah, it's funny.
Or next time.
It's funny since our last episode, as we've communicated sort of outside of the confines of the show to each other, and it's like, oh look, they finally talked about that thing we mentioned last week.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's
So yeah, I mean, it's a lot to digest all at once, but at the same time, I kind of feel, it's kind of cool being on the leading edge of sort of breaking the news, right? Even if it is only a half a dozen people listening.
Exactly. And I know the fans appreciate it.
Something interesting that I want to talk about from that scene as well, looking at the console, is that on the left-hand side of the display, there's an indicator of what I interpret to be planets. And I say that because the icons, one of them looks like it has rings around it, but they're abbreviated, and the abbreviations are, I don't know, the abbreviations don't really make any sense to me because the planet that is indicated, which we know is Trask, that's where they're going, is actually abbreviated SC. So it doesn't really make any sense to me. But the other ones from the top down, so it's MC at the top, SC, DC, and then the fourth one at the bottom is GRC. And initially in my head, I'm like, oh, MC. I wonder if that's is that a reference to, Mon Calamari, being that Trask is a watery planet? But I don't think so, unless they're retconning the system and that, Caliban and Mon Calamari now exist within the same system. But I don't think so. I think it's a far stretch.
No, I don't. Yeah, it might be a far stretch. I think that it's indicative of the way the Empire really went roughshod on Mon Cal.
Yeah.
Just after the Galactic Civil War, in the novel literature, they light up Mon Cal on the way to do Jakku,
right?
Essentially trying to destroy the shipyards and things. So it might be deeper story about how the Mon Cal have had, and the Quarren, same planet, right?
Right.
Have had to relocate vast parts of their society to safer places, I guess.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, and let's go back into some of that deeper Star Wars lore and previous visual outings with both the Mon Calamari and the Quarren. You didn't get that sort of from Return of the Jedi, because I don't think we really saw them. I mean, the Quarren was a single alien in Jabba's palace, and the only, the Mon Calamari were, outside of Admiral Akbar, we didn't really see many of them in the original trilogy. So
they're described in the D6 game literature as shipbuilders.
The Mon Calamari, very much, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And they used to do civilian contracts for pleasure cruisers, and so all the rebel frigates are converted pleasure ships.
I was thinking more along the lines of even in Clone Wars, where there's that episode. I think it's a multi-part arc with Lee Char, and Lee Char as the budding prince, king of the whatever.
King,
yeah. But they pose the Mon Calamari and the Quarren as enemies.
They do. You get a Gungan Naboo feel.
Yeah, almost.
Yeah, tentative alliance, and they might have been shooting for some sort of Aquaman, Namor, Atlantis kind of vibe, just for adventure's sake.
I just think in light of the Disney canon, it's a sharp contrast to what we see on Trask, where on what I've been referring to as the dockyard, we see Mon Calamari and Quarren going about their business without any trouble at all. So
yeah, it's got to be about money too, because when we see those guys in Clone Wars, everybody lives underwater.
Yeah,
everybody here is on a dock, dry dock.
That's right. Yeah,
too,
yeah,
whatever they're called, basics. And so this is about making money. This is a black market after all.
They touch on that later in the episode.
Which part is that?
The whole Trask being a very black market.
Yeah,
place.
That's right. So I mean, clearly the financial thing it plays a role here. Yeah. But it apparently is a little more nefarious than we're initially led to believe.
I love the comedic beat where the engine misfires at the very last second before the glorious touchdown, the hero landing.
Yes.
And dumps them into the ocean. It's great.
You have this controller, this, ambiguous voice, the controller, who just calm as anything, just keeps telling him, you need to slow down. You need to slow down. And then he's like, I'm doing the best I can here.
Yeah. Flips them off right. He takes his hand off the control to turn the thing off.
Yeah.
That's a really Han Solo thing to do.
But you're thinking, oh my God, they're going to thunder in. And we talked about this before about having that pucker factor where you felt like they were actually going to lose the crest.
Yeah.
I really felt like they were going to lose it this time. And I'm like, oh, they're going to lose it. And then the retro thrusters fire. I'm like, oh, okay, no, they're not going to. And then boom, the engine goes out and bloop.
Because, it is like a double misdirection.
Oh, big time.
And did you catch the little bit of Star Wars cursing he drops in?
Oh my God, another dank Ferric.
Yep.
Yeah, twice in this episode, actually.
Yeah, so ever since you brought that up, it's become more and more prevalent, and it really is. It's in my brain now that it's like
baby.
Yeah. So there's an interesting. To me, I find this without having to do anything. So my favorite side character of the entire episode is the Mon Calamari dock worker who just stands there, hands on his hips, completely unfazed in his green cable knit sweater and chest waders, and just watches the whole thing unfolding. No,
it's true. He even puts his hands on his hips and then looks up as the thing's crashing down. And nobody's running.
Nope.
No, nobody's panicking or anything. This thing is streaking out of the sky. It could be a comet.
Exactly. Does this kind of stuff happen every day around here?
It seems like it does.
So I made a note. I'm like, meanwhile, Mon Calamari dressed up in his in hip waders and a cable knit sweater, looking like a Boston whaler or a longshoreman, stands unfazed watching the entire crash unfold.
And after you said that, I looked at and I was like, "That's a fantastic sweater." They
God!
Brought their uncle's sweater, and then I started looking at all the other characters, and there's guys with beanies on. And
yes.
And there's all kinds of sweaters, and it looks. And bartender, the Mon Cal bartender, even calls Mandalorian buddy.
Oh yeah,
very East Coast feel to it.
Actually. Hey buddy.
Yeah, hey buddy. It's pretty great.
So then the Razor Crest unceremoniously flips into the water, and we're hit with the title cards, and then we get this really awesome kind of. It's what, again, going back to comics, this big splash page of the Razor Crest getting hauled out of the water by this mobile loading gantry. And it's this it's like literally a crane on an AT-AT body.
I found concept art from Solo.
Yeah.
And it's very similar to the Corellian cargo walker.
So Doug Chiang is like really prevalent in a lot of the production design, and I kind of wonder if that's one of his.
Oh yeah, almost certainly.
But yeah, so the mobile landing gantry, which I'm like, well, that is like if that's not the coolest non-military usage of that technology, and I wondered, like, as a kid, right, when you see the AT-ATs on Hoth and you're thinking, oh, that's really cool, and you buy into it because it's cool. But
Yes.
as an adult, I'm like,
Super not practical.
why the change? Like, when you have repulsor technology and the ability to hover and fly, what usage is there to move away from that to something that is on legs?
Tarkin talks about it in the novel, I think. Not
Sure.
specifically the walkers, but about their whole image being about striking fear.
Yeah.
So it could be something about like this low, lumbering thing is coming to get you, and there's not a lot you can do about it.
So it kind of poses the question with the loading gantry: is that a purpose-built machine, or is that a repurposed
Piece of leftover
Yeah.
Empire tech.
Yeah.
That's a good point regarding the timeline. I
don't
think that
know.
we see them in Solo on Corellia, so I think that they might be a thing.
Yeah. So they literally drop the Razor Crest with Frog Lady, Din, and the child still in the cockpit, kaboom, onto the deck.
With a thud.
Oh yeah. And I mean, again, hard to tell. I mean, that looks so practical. Like, it just looks real. Like, the landing struts taking the impact and it just kind of rocking there, and then the water sloshing out of it. I'm like, for something that's made on a television budget, I don't think I've seen. I mean, I don't say this facetiously. I genuinely mean this. I don't think I've ever seen higher production values in a TV show ever.
It's crazy good. I'd be interested in seeing the numbers. I don't know if they're available, but it's crazy good.
The episode cost.
Yeah, I think it's brought way down by this technology they've invented.
Yeah. Talking about the Razor Crest and how, it's its own character, and, you think that they're going to lose it. And you really get a sense of like how bad it is when it's sitting there on the dock and you can see through it.
Clear through it. I know.
Yeah. I'm like, oh my Lord.
It's in rough shape.
So they debark the ship, and Longshoreman is just kind of standing there like, and Din is like, basically hands him a handful of money and says, do what you can. Or he says, can you fix it? And he's like, fix it? Nope, but I can make it fly.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah.
If it'll hold it.
Exactly. Yeah. I'll fuel it up if it still holds fuel.
So good.
Yeah, and then I get this sense of the dockyard itself. I guess I keep saying dockyard, but really those aerial shots we see, it's more like a small town, if not a big town, or even a small city, But
Port.
I never.
It's hard to see whether it's connected to land or it's
Right.
isolated floating there, but it's certainly, yeah.
Well, the loading gantry is standing in shallow enough water that I get the impression that it's standing on the bottom. So, because initially I'm like, is it a floating structure, or is it
I'd have to look at
on
when
land?
he's burning up in the atmosphere. I'd have to look at that again, his approach, because
Yeah.
we do a big overview of it. I didn't catch it.
Yeah, I don't know, but it looks very cool, almost like at certain angles and certain scenes, I got like a Waterworld vibe off of it, the big floating city in Waterworld.
Totally.
But then in other sequences, I'm like, no, it still looks very much like well, I mean, you live in Halifax, you've been past the dockyard, you know what it looks like, on a dreary, drab day, right? I'm like, yep, that looks authentic.
It totally looks authentic.
Yeah,
And I was
yeah,
thinking
yeah.
that we're reminded that this isn't just that the Mandalorian itself as an entity is a Star Wars show, because this episode doesn't feel at all like a Western. But
No.
it certainly feels like a Star Wars. So there's many different aspects that they're drawing from.
Absolutely.
Been leaning heavily on the Western motifs, but this has got we're inside Imperial ships and stuff. And
Yeah. I got this. There was almost like going back to the menagerie of characters that are just milling about on the dockyard, like in the various costuming choices. And there's one Quarren walking around with a waist cut, almost like an oilskin coat, and it's kind of flared out, and he's got this, I don't know what the style of hat is called, but it looks like a pirate.
Yeah.
You know,
Like
so
maybe that Pirates of the Caribbean character.
You know, it's funny that you say that, because I had that sort of impression too. Like
a little bit later on,
Yeah.
there's a very heavy influence.
Yeah, the Pirates influence, sure. And especially when, you know, you look at Davy Jones
Yep.
and his
Mm-hmm.
tentacled face. But one thing I really notice on the, you know, in this opening sequence sort of hitting the dockyard is like, there's this really cool, and again, this is a technical thing, and I don't know how they accomplished it. I'm not sure. There's a varying mix of like temperatures in the shot where like the docks themselves and the costuming lends itself to this like cold, wet environment. And I'm sitting there on the couch watching this thing thinking I should throw a blanket on because it's kind of cold. But then you look at the contrast between the skin tones of all of the aliens, like the Mon Calas look like lobster that are ready to come out of the pot. You know, they're so red. And even some of the Quarren, like their skin tones, and the frog couple, they're so bright and vibrant. Like there's this such a tonal, Frog Dad, such a tonal, like there's a temperature difference there.
I agree. There's a scene coming up, if I forget it, remind me, about a tonal change where it because the episode is so drab and gray, there's an incredible tonal change at one point, just for a split second, that is really important. I just want to say I got to apologize to Frog Mom for thinking that she was more nefarious than she was, and that a strong, independent woman couldn't be good with a blaster and really good at reprogramming the security droid. So shout out to Frog Mom. Really sorry about that.
She deserves every bit of that. Kind of cool though. They hop off and she kind of goes into this. I guess it's really just kind of like calling for him, which is kind of cheesy, but at the same time, it's kind of not.
No,
you know?
What would you do? I certainly would. Yeah,
They get their moment.
They do, and
nice.
They get this real touching moment where, you know, they get that moment. They're reunited, and there's that tender moment where they, you know, they touch suction cuppy hands and, you know, nuzzle each other, and then the big thank you moment. But then we're right back into the quest. And it's, you know, I was told you could lead me to others of my kind. And, you know, Frog Dad.
Played by John Cameron.
Do we know more about him?
Producer on Legion.
Legion, the film.
TV series.
Oh, Legion, I haven't watched it yet. So
No, me neither.
Okay. Is it based on the film?
I've dabbled in it. It's pretty cool. And it's in the X-Men universe.
Oh.
Son of Charles Xavier.
Oh, that Legion. I was thinking Legion, the film with Dennis. No, not that one. That's something else. What am I thinking of? Anyway, doesn't matter what I'm thinking.
Nope.
Into the inn. In the inn, this is a pretty cool scene. Again, that whole sort of almost like 1930s, late 30s, early 1940s, like the way that he has that interaction with him about, you know, ordering food and how these seats are scarce, so anybody who's sitting's got to eat.
Yeah, Depression era stuff.
Very much so. Oh, but before we get to the inn, we get that scene from the trailer, the first look at Sasha Banks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at this point,
it's cut differently because you get in the trailer, the child looks up at Mando and Mando looks down at the child, and they have a moment there. It's not in the episode.
No, I never did get the sense from the trailer that Mando actually saw her, but from watching the episode, to me, he clearly glances over, sees her, she recognizes that, uh-oh, he saw me, and that's why she ducks away.
Yeah, I kind of got that vibe too.
Yeah. And at this point, I'm still thinking, you know, skin tone and you know, it could be. I'm still very much in the, maybe it is Sabine, you know?
I was in that camp.
Yeah. And then we get this there's a long shot where I think it's a boom shot too, where the camera pans back and up And then again, that water world vibe. But really, just going back to what I'd said before about this whole show, maybe better than anything else, just gives me that impression that it's a real lived-in world.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so true. And that's what was really missing from the prequels.
I agree with you on that. Yeah, they all wore uniforms, and there was lots of identifiable Star Wars-y elements, but everything just
shiny and new.
Yeah, very much. Almost in a Trek sense, like.
No, it's very true. Even Tatooine was shiny and new.
Yeah. So back into the inn, the frog couple motions Mando to go through the door, and then he kind of gestures at the innkeeper, who tells them to take a seat. And again, there orders the chowder, talks about the scarcity of the seats and how everybody needs to eat. But
Pays
then
in the calamari flan.
Well, here's the thing, like the calamari flan. Do we think that that's the currency that he was paid in the first season?
Possibly.
I mean, it's probably one of the common currencies if it's readily available to gangsters and regular folk. It is the thing he goes to instead of Imperial credits and before Beskar. So So Beskar comes up kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It comes up in this episode again when we were talking about it as currency, and
as a very highly
we're rich brothers.
Yeah. So he slides the calamari flan across the table and says, "I'll buy information," and turns out the innkeeper does know, and he actually says the others with Beskar have been through here. And through that interaction, he arranges for Mando to meet with this Quarren, I don't know, unsavory.
Felt like an RPG game interaction.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, he's the questionable, I can help you, maybe.
But do we trust him?
Right. And at first, I'm like, sure, I trust him. And I think I've already sort of bought into the idea that, Mon Calamari are good guys.
Yeah. And
so
if they're working with the Quarren.
Right. So, I mean, if the Mon Calamari sets it up, it's got to be okay. Which begs the question, at the end of the episode, was the Mon Calamari innkeeper, was he in on the double cross the whole time, or was he, ignorant of that?
Don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. Which could implicate Frog Mom again.
Can put her back in your sights.
She's good for now.
Yeah.
Got my eye on you, though.
Side note on the server.
Yeah.
Played by Norwood Cheek.
Norwood Cheek. Okay. Another person that I can't tell you anything about.
Notable because he's a member of Cardinal Family Singers with Peyton Reed.
Oh, so Peyton Reed of the director of the last episode. Yeah. That's interesting.
Crazy.
I wonder. Yeah, really, eh?
Who do we know?
I don't know anybody. I know you.
Yeah, you could be in my movie, bro.
Right on. I feel like this next moment is kind of this. It's almost a callback to The Passenger with the chowder and the squid.
Yeah, no, definitely. I call it catharsis. It's a little bit almost a jokey slap in the face is the wrong word, but a light tap to the back of the head for us all assuming face hugger.
Yeah.
Immediately. It was almost like a comedic beat to go, no.
I loved it.
Here's what we think of face huggers. And it was great. It was so funny, actually.
As he's just kind of like, just hands kind of waving and like,
don't
this
play
muffled,
with your food.
The muffled, blah, 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 I don't know what to do. Cool moment though. Yeah. Like, don't play with your food, as he like leans over and very adeptly poke. And that was the end of that. Right on. So, we make the deal with the Quarren, who says, yeah, I can take you to others of your kind, but it's a few hours sail. And, then we get another little moment from the trailer that we've seen. And at this point now, when the camera dials in on the boat, it's clearly a fishing vessel of some kind with all the outrigging on it and the traps and the barrels and the netting. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it literally is a fishing boat.
It's sort of strange that they fish above water.
Yeah, for a race that is completely aquatic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of strange.
Yeah. So
I didn't pick it up, but I was reading, and someone else said that it might be a repurposed Hammerhead cruiser as featured in Rogue One.
It's awfully small for a Hammerhead. It could be a portion of a Hammerhead.
Maybe.
Or they use calling the mast at the front to be like that doesn't make sense to me. I think the scale is maybe a little off there. I'd have to go back and look at it, but
It gave me vibes of like a more haphazard desert skiff, only not on repulsors.
yeah, very much so. Very much. I know the descriptive video called the big structure on the front a mast, and then it said the two outriggers were pontoons below the surface.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so some kind of boat. But again,
I love the descriptive audio. It's key.
Yeah, it's really helpful, and
Yeah.
and it's funny how plainly it's read in whoever that lady is.
No, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
Actually. I would listen to her read a whole novel.
Yeah.
But that scene does have another throwback to the Pirates vibe.
Oh, certainly.
In what sense?
In like the cruising by and the ship going out.
Oh yeah.
Very Pirates of the Caribbean-ish.
Yeah, and the whole like top down looking down on the boat and seeing the crew bustling around going about whatever their duties are.
Yeah.
The crew entirely Quarren, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And again, the descriptive video kind of helped in this one because I couldn't really put it together, but it very specifically mentions that at least for 3 of them, it refers to them as Quarren brothers 1, 2, and 3.
It's true.
So apparently Quarrens have large families. So the guy from the inn basically talks about, they have this, what they call a mama core on board in what I called it a wet hold because
definitely the hold. Yeah.
No real explanation for why they have it other than they just have it.
You ever seen one eat?
Yeah. And it's like, what's going on here? And a huge thing about, we usually feed it in the morning, but we didn't do that today because we knew we were going out. And then we get the double cross.
Yep.
Yeah, and we see the pram is like it's like a repulsor lift thing, and it almost hits the water, so it doesn't do as well over water as land. You
kind of wonder if maybe in the whatever his pole arm, his gaff hook,
he
smacked it with if it damaged it.
Yeah, that's possible. That's possible too.
So this is an interesting part of the episode where I really struggle with this because as soon as he started talking, the Quarren character, I'm like, wait a minute. I got really dialed in on the voice, and I'm like, and I went a bunch of different ways as we talked about off show, and I'm just kind of I'm going to go through my process here because it's pretty silly. But originally, I thought that Quarren might have been Carl Weathers just disguising his voice, and on some level, I think you can kind of hear that. And to me, it was an easy stretch because they already have him as a cast member. So just, hey, can you do an alien creature for us for an episode?
There's certainly a precedent for actors doing multiple characters.
Of course.
Especially voiceovers.
What's that?
Especially voiceovers.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, look at animation, right? Look at how many character roles can be played by one actor in the course of a single episode of any animated show.
It's true.
Archer
and Bob's Burgers.
Yeah.
And Family Guy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example. My default is Frank Welker. Frank Welker who can voice virtually anybody. Really. I mean, he's just that versatile.
It's true.
But yeah, so at first I'm like, maybe it's Carl Weathers. And I'm like, no, it's not Carl Weathers. And then I'm just listening to the gruffness of the voice and I'm like, Jason Momoa, maybe? And I'm like, no. And then I had this big, like, oh my God moment. And I sent you a message. I sent both of you messages. I'm like, I'm going to eat my boot if it's not this guy. And I thought, now in hindsight, it's completely silly that I even thought this. But for a minute, I thought it might have been Brad Pitt. And
there's a way he delivers one of the lines that I might have been just really rooting for you. It's
I know.
Really hard to find it.
I didn't want to lead you guys and get on the bandwagon with me, but it was like I'm gonna put my foot down on this one. This is what I think.
I thought it could have been Wilfred Brimley for a sec.
I don't even. Is he still alive?
He's not alive.
Yeah. Okay.
Be a hell of a trick.
Brimley vibe.
Hey, from the grave.
Yeah. Hey, Tarkin was in a movie, so.
Yeah, absolutely was.
I agree with your final landing.
I thought Brad Pitt in the line where he's like, let the kids see. And I was immediately reminded of, the Ocean's movies, like Ocean's 11, where there's a couple moments where he's got to disguise his voice over the phone. and it was very much that same kind of lisp. But early on in the conversation, Andy sends a message over and he's like, Edgar suit. And I'm like, Edgar suit? Yeah, from
Vincent D'Onofrio.
Vincent D'Onofrio out of Men in Black.
Mm.
And then I'm watching it, and this is my third time around, and Kim is on the couch with me, and we're watching it, and we've just finished watching it, and I've gone back to the scene, and I'm playing it over and over and over again because I'm still not 100% settled on what I think this is. And Kim looks at me, and she's like, Edgar suit, and I'm like, oh, you're right. So anyway, I think we're all in agreement that the Quarren brother number 2 is Vincent D'Onofrio, and he's using that same voice that he did for Men in Black.
Yeah, I wrote to you, I'm convinced
Yeah.
that you're correct. Yeah, no, absolutely. He sounds a lot like Edgar Suit.
Yeah, very much.
Oh, brother.
Oh, that's a fantastic impression, by the way.
Oh, thanks.
So
This one's going to be out for a while because there's no credit on it.
Well, that's right. And I mean, we talked a bit about the Brad Pitt thing and his uncredited appearance in Deadpool.
Yeah.
Where he did a voiceover for that. And
Oh, no, it was no voiceover. It was just a face.
Sorry, yes. Yeah, you're right. You're
like
right.
Half-second clip of his face.
Yeah, yeah. I wanted to talk about the Mama Core for a minute.
Mm.
And this, again, no previous references for this monster in the lore.
At first, before I watched it with subtitles, I thought he said Mama Quarren.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so my brain was like, "What? Oh, are these things spawned from this crazy big creature?" I do have in my notes that every fifth species has crazy rows of teeth, like a sarlacc
really.
pit.
Yeah.
We get a lot of that in this.
We got it with the spiders in the previous episode.
Yeah.
We're getting it again. And again, like you said before,
Great dragon as well.
Great Dragon, going as far back as that scene with the Minox in Empire and how they had like that circular
Absolutely.
mouth.
Yeah. Every fifth species has rows of teeth.
The Mama Core, I felt, looked a lot like and very much suitable for an episode that's all on the water, but I said it looks like a sea anemone. And then the only other thing I could think of was the Black Mercy from DC Comics had a very similar kind of, tentacled, toothy, but I don't think this one has the ability to take over your brain.
Probably
In the
not.
descriptive audio, they call it a Leviathan.
Oh, that's a great description for it too.
And that, again, lends itself to like a Pirates of the Caribbean style
Sure
Kraken.
does. Yeah. Cool monster nonetheless.
For sure.
I kind of wonder though, do they keep this thing specifically for those purposes? Like, because those guys, like you say, they were like, we're going to be rich because now the Beskar is ours. And they slam the door. Or first of all, I should say once the child is swallowed, the Din makes no hesitation, dives in like immediately like a concerned father, concerned parent. But then there's the struggle between, and I equate it to, we talked a little bit about life support in Beskar armor, which apparently does not include an oxygen supply.
I said that helmet is not pressurized.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Finally we know.
Yeah. So there's this contrast between wanting to, save the child, but I can't breathe. So
Possibly not able to swim either.
well, maybe not too, because of the weight of his armor.
I thought that because he went down and sort of came to the surface, but in a hell of a struggle.
Yeah,
So I
bobbed back up
did look
and
over at
And
Lauren
it
at one point
did
and say,
look like the
yeah,
jetpack
he's
was going
heavily-
off.
yeah, you got that impression
I
too.
got that
eh?
impression that the jetpack was firing to keep him afloat.
Yeah, and
Oh, I have to look at that again. Yeah, good call.
maybe not as effective underwater.
No.
Maybe, who knows? But they're definitely, I listened to it a couple of times, and one of the brothers is like, drown him, and they start hammering him with all those poles, right, trying to get him to go down. So is it the Mama Core that does the killing, or the drowning that does the killing? Like, I don't get it.
Maybe a bit of both.
Yeah. So my question is, if these guys who were ostensibly pirates, if they're doing this on the regular, how are they recovering whatever it is from the Mama Core?
Maybe it spits it out like a sarlacc.
I don't know.
It's possible. Maybe it's an intelligent creature that works with them. Maybe they've got baby manticores held hostage or some.
Well, that's a fantastic point
on
too.
it, Perhaps it's more intelligent than we're led to believe.
Well, that's just it. And I think that there's a predisposition to associate anything monstrous as unintelligent, and that's not always the case.
There's a neat thing on Twitter a couple months ago, and it was a guy interacting with Pablo Hidalgo,
Sure.
asking why in all the literature the word tauntaun is never capitalized. And Pablo Hidalgo says, we don't capitalize creatures. Rancors aren't capitalized. Sarlaccs aren't capitalized. Tauntauns aren't capitalized. And I thought, well, that's kind of a neat distinction.
To denote them as beasts?
As opposed to sentient characters.
Oh, okay.
Or classes, if you will. Like, that's kind of neat.
It is kind of neat. And I never would have picked up on that.
Never.
Again, yeah. So I'm like, judging from the conversation between the deckhands, it appears that this has been a common tactic for them to pirate other people of their valuables. In this case, the Beskar that the Mandalorian is wearing. So that leads me into my whole line of questioning about how exactly did they go about doing that? But then there's a whole other layer to that. Does that mean that they've actually gotten other Mandalorians? Or does this lean back into that idea of Beskar as currency, and they've lifted ingots, of Beskar off of other travelers?
It could be that this is a whole sort of Mandalorian armor poaching
Maybe.
Division of the... I know I'm stretching, but like Beskar is highly sought after, so maybe it's a thing they could really cobble together fairly quickly. We don't see time pass between the scene in the inn and we just see a wipe and he's on the ship, so maybe they got the ship ready.
Maybe
they could have, maybe they spent the morning putting a Manticore in a hold to get ready. It still doesn't make sense why they fish above water too.
No.
The next scene, even though it's the cavalry and it's wonderful, it almost doesn't make sense either.
That I was thinking about that last night. I mean, I was really like, I was burning it at both ends by the time I'd wrapped up my notes. I'm like, I just can't write anymore. But that hit me. It was like, how did they know? Like,
they just needed to be there, and I love every second of it.
Does it go back to... So for those who are... I mean, I guess we should probably bring the listeners up to speed on that. So we had this cavalry moment where, lo and behold, 3 Mandalorians on jetpacks land on the deck, and between the 3 of them make short work of the Quarren crew and rescue Din Djarin.
There's so much going on in this scene too.
My gosh, yeah.
Between Din's POV, and then like a sort of a floating POV from a camera.
Yeah.
They hold on the helmet for a beat.
Yeah.
And you immediately, if you're a fan of Rebels and you're a fan of Clone Wars, you immediately know who's under that helmet, or at least whose helmet it was originally.
Exactly, yeah.
And then there's another beautiful moment where the second female character rockets in and she does this like spinning barrel roll kick.
Yeah.
Straight out of comic books, and that's amazing. I love that. I watched that thing like 11 times.
It's a really good drop kick, which lends to her other.
It really does, yeah. And I don't know, because I'm so out of touch with the WWE. Is that a signature for her?
I don't know if it's a full-on signature, but it is something she's utilized.
Yeah.
I actually, when I Googled it and got her real name, I was like, oh, that's not Sasha Banks.
Yeah.
And I called up a picture of Sasha Banks and put it beside the actress from a still from the show, and I was like, well, no, that's the same person. What's going on here?
Mercedes.
That's how,
Mercedes. What's her name? Last name, Andy?
Varnado?
Yeah, I don't want to...
I am so out of touch with wrestling.
I do not want to mess it up, so we'll just go with Sasha Banks.
Perfect. And then the male Mandalorian that drops down, I noticed like his fighting style was more like karate. Like they were so much more fluid, and they're really more like they're better at what they were doing.
Absolutely, they are.
And I wrote down more kung fu than Krav Maga, which is more like Mando's like breakneck, like absolutely has to end an opponent as quick as possible.
It's funny because I made some notes about the contrasting fighting styles too, and I'll talk about it a little bit later because it lends itself. There's another cue in the episode that triggered me to it, which we'll get to. But very good point that it's important to note that there is a difference in style, and it's important also to note that style, not only is it, like you say, more karate and less Krav Maga, but I think there is also a difference because there's 3 of them fighting in concert versus the Mandalorian who's always fighting alone.
No, they look like a well-oiled machine.
Yes,
done this
very much.
Many times together. Absolutely.
Yeah. So like we say, the cage is opened. He's plucked from the water. And as he's sitting there, so this is another thing. And this goes back to last episode in The Passenger, and you know, we kind of softened our approach to it from throwaway episode to big character development piece. And I just want to touch on that for a second, because I really feel like this scene, when you have an episode that is so short and so action packed, there's only so many ways that you can get in those moments. And I really feel like this moment where Mando is sitting outside the cage, and he's like visibly like
he's rocking back and forth,
trying to catch his breath.
Get the child.
Do you hear the urgency in his voice?
Yeah.
There's a
Awesome
creature.
acting,
Get
actually.
me, get the kid.
There's a creature. It's got the child. Save the child. That's not a protector. That's a parent.
Yeah.
That is
he dove in
very
the water
much.
like
Yeah.
a parent. He panicked like a parent.
And
He's thankful when they rescue the child like a parent.
yeah, exactly. And I really empathize with this character in his development, and I'm super happy that they're writing him this way, and the more time we spend with him and the more time that they're together, the less he's still gruff and rough and tumble, you know, in that Han Solo-y kind of way, but there's more to him.
There's a really powerful moment before he gets out of the water where she puts out her hand.
Yeah.
And he reaches for it, and she pulls him out, and that it reduces him to the child for a moment again.
Oh, exactly. It's the same.
I went back and watched that episode from the finale, and it's the same scene. It's shot from a different angle. I was even actually looking at it to see if it was a female character that pulled him out. I don't think it was, but as a child, I mean. But it's very powerful.
Yeah, super callback.
In the moment of his parenting, and he's reduced to a child momentarily.
Yeah.
To really bring that home.
Well, is this not the first time, at least in the course of the show, that we've truly seen him helpless?
I agree.
You know, we've never seen him in a situation
he dies
where
there if they don't show up.
Well, this is it. Like, he's never been in a situation where he didn't have some recourse, some trick, something in his tickle trunk to get him out of that situation.
I thought he was going to grab one of the spears and bring it down there and kill the creature and come back up. And,
possibly.
I had all these ideas. Because, you know, he's James Bond, right? He can't die here, but then he needs to be rescued.
Just out of curiosity, does anybody know, does Bryce Dallas Howard have children?
I believe she mentions that in Gallery, that she has children.
Because she has kids. And I wonder if that plays into her direction of this episode, you know?
It's quite possible. His acting again is stupendous, considering that he's under a helmet. I can't keep coming back to that enough.
Yeah, so no surprise. I guess we should talk about this. Probably bring this up now because it's very important to the direction, not only of this episode, but potentially for the direction of the entire series. The three Mandalorians. Let's talk about them specifically. So we've got Katie Sackhoff, previously revealed to be cast as Bo-Katan of Clan Kryze. And we've got Sasha Banks as Koska Reeves. And Simon, I don't want to mess up this guy's name. Simon Kazdianades as Axe Woves.
So fantastic. Everybody looks just perfect.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the lore and the history and why these people are important. And let's start with Bo-Katan's helmet specifically.
The Night Owl.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a line where they have their little, I don't want to call it a standoff, but it is. It's kind of a standoff where it's helmets are removed and faces are revealed. He says, "I've been searching for you for a long time." And, you know, immediately the helmet comes off, and it's almost a callback to the Marshal. It's like, where'd you get that?
He just watched them save his bacon. He steps. He's got to know somewhere in there that he's not ready to deal with three of those guys right now.
No.
And he steps them anyway because this is the way.
Yeah, exactly. Which we're going to find out doesn't necessarily mean it's the only way.
Gets deep, man.
It does. It gets really deep here. And so here we have these three characters, one of which is, I don't want to say a legacy character, but at this point she has enough history on her own to be counted as a heavy hitter. She's a major player in the galaxy. And so Bo-Katan,
she's got more screen time than Luke Skywalker.
I guess if you totaled up the number of minutes on screen, I guess so, yeah.
Yep.
So for those of you who don't know, Bo-Katan is a naturalized, born Mandalorian. And if you're a fan of the Clone Wars, she's the sister of Satine, the once insinuated girlfriend of Obi-Wan Kenobi. So it's important to know that in the history of Mandalore, there was a movement, whereas Satine wanted to lead the planet forward sort of peaceably. Potentially, there was this bid to join the Republic or, join the Confederacy, and Satine wanted to maintain Mandalore's independence, but she wanted to do it peaceably. Like, she didn't feel there was a need.
Want to get involved in the Clone Wars.
Yeah, she didn't. But then there's this other sect, as we'll call them, who really felt like, they wanted to restore the culture to their ancient warrior ways. And they were going under the moniker the Death Watch. And if you listen to our Season 1 recap, you'll know that the Death Watch is the organization that rescued Din Djarin in childhood.
Oh, certainly.
Yeah.
And they played such a big part in both Rebels and Clone Wars.
They do. At some point in the history of the planet, there's an ideological shift within the Death Watch itself, where Bo-Katan herself is actually a member of the Death Watch under the leadership of Pre Vizsla, who is voiced by Jon Favreau, and they have an ideological falling out where I guess this is around the time when Maul kind of takes over.
It's really close. They're sort of bumping heads as we're heading into that storyline.
Yeah,
it's all sort of part and parcel. And I just we gotta step back a bit because there's some exposition, and I think it occurs in Rebels, but it's about what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's Fen Rao talking to Kanan Jarrus about the Mandalore.
That's right.
Tar Vizsla was the first Mandalore to be allowed in the Jedi Order.
Right, so he would be the maker of the Darksaber.
Of the Darksaber.
Right.
And therefore, and he died a Jedi. They don't really get into that, but he died a Jedi and was so revered that the Jedi kept his saber at the temple in honor of him. And he also references that's about 1,000 years ago.
Right.
So we could be talking about the Old Republic and dipping into that legend stuff that we know about the Mandalore.
Oh, right.
So that could be the same guy because we know we're pulling from legends where it's fruitful.
Well, then, I mean, just as an aside to that, I guess there's room for that to be explored in this High Republic stuff that's coming.
Certainly, because it puts us a little closer to that, that stuff's fresher in the memory.
Yeah.
And he also talks about the conflict between the Jedi and the Mandalorians, and that this is back 800 years before the Battle of Yavin.
Yeah.
That's when the split occurs, and the ancestors of Tar Vizsla raid the Jedi Temple and take back the Darksaber.
Right.
And then it's passed down father to son all the way to Pre Vizsla when we meet him in the Clone Wars.
Right, because he's in possession of it when we first are introduced to him.
Absolutely.
Right, that's right.
Little exposition for him.
No, it's perfect because, I mean, it's been a while since I've watched those episodes, so I was a little foggy on sort of the where the ideological shift came from, but that totally clears it up.
I had previously thought that there was a dramatic ideological shift when Maul obtains the saber.
Sure.
But then I'm thinking, well, like I sort of tried to age Din Djarin, and it puts him, I don't know how old he is in that scene. I put him at about 6, maybe 7 years old.
Yeah.
In that rescue scene. And that puts him at about 36 years old here, which is perfect. He's 45. The actor is 45. He's always wearing a helmet. It's not necessary, but it definitely predates Maul's coup with the Super Commandos during the early days of the Empire.
No, you're right. But it's important to note that it's around that time where there's this, again, talking about ideologies, where Bo-Katan and Pre Vizsla, they fall out with each other.
Certainly.
And she's decided that she can no longer follow them because in her opinion, no off-worlder will ever be Mandalore. Right.
She's a purist. And she gives some pretty neat acting, like, eye looks too in some of the scenes with, like, she is a purist.
Yeah. She didn't necessarily agree with the pacifistic ways of her sister, but she was very much of the opinion that, only Mandalorians can be Mandalore.
Right. And she says the word zealot with some zealousness.
She does.
It's very, very nuanced performance.
Yeah.
There's more to her. In terms of Din Djarin, I don't think she's necessarily an ally.
I don't think she's an ally, certainly not in the immediate sense, but there's a point in the episode where I think she. I'm going to hold off on that because it's going to interrupt my flow, and I don't want to miss. I don't want to miss something.
Yeah.
So now that we have a rough idea of who these people are, there's a line where she says, "You're a child of the Watch," and so of course we know that means the Death Watch. But the more I thought about that, it's like, okay, so what do we know about the Death Watch? We know that Din Djarin is a foundling. We know that the heavy Mandalorian infantryman is a descendant of Pre Vizsla. So Paz Vizsla, also voiced by Jon Favreau, makes sense.
Yes, makes a lot of sense. And I had sent you a little message.
You did, yeah.
Perhaps the rightful heir to the throne of Mandalore.
Entirely possible. But then I started having these sort of questions about, like, you know, Children of the Watch, and it calls into question the authority of the Armorer. The Armorer, who is arguably the caretaker of the oral history of the clan, has no
shaman vibe from her.
She has no idea who the Jedi are.
It's true, or from a certain point of view may kick in here.
That's entirely possible.
Perhaps she's not educating her children as to who the Jedi are.
I feel like it's more a case of, you know, these Children of the Watch, the clan, how they exist in these coverts. I think they exist in these coverts because somewhere along the line, we've run out of naturally born Mandalorians to carry on the tradition. And so the only way that we can survive, because he says, weapons are my religion, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know, the Mandalorian code is less of a philosophy, and they've really dug into it as an edict. And the only way that they could survive was by going around the galaxy and picking up kids and indoctrinating them, you know, almost like this brainwashing,
very,
you know, this is the way. Yes, very similar, but maybe not necessarily to the same, with the same intent. So anyway, just kind of food for thought about, you know, what does
that point kind of like, there's a thing, like he's I say worldly, but he's a galactic guy. He's all over the system chasing down bounties. He seems to know a lot of languages. He knows lore. He knows customs of different species. He knows how to fly many different ships. He's familiar with weapons and things. How the hell does he not know who the Jedi are? When you have Broom Boy playing with action figures in the future.
I often wonder that too. But again, you know, we talked
They're
about
lied
this.
to. There's a scene coming up where they talk about Mandalore the planet. I think it's in this scene. He's been lied to his whole life.
Absolutely. We go back to our previous episode when we talked about how could the entire galaxy just basically rule out, you know, thousands of years of galactic history and what the Jedi were. And we made that parallel to, you know, what's going on in the United States with the, you know, the average citizenry refuting, you know, science. Mm-hmm. And so we actually have a real world example of how a truth can be untold in such a short period of time. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that he has no idea. It just, you know, I think as, you know, well-grounded and well-rounded people, we have a hard time understanding that.
It's possible. It's very telling that she calls them a cult, and what we know about cult sort of mentality is certainly the brainwashing aspect. And I think it's very neat in terms of the lore of Mandalore. He uses the term "there is only one way."
Yeah, the way of the Mandalore.
Mandalore.
Yeah.
And so this is all very, very, very exciting for me.
It's super exciting for me too, because it puts us on a crash course to, at least in the broader sense, Bo-Katan is gunning for the Darksaber because she wants to liberate Mandalore.
And she says in this scene, and I'm going to jump ahead.
Sure.
She says in this scene, we want to restore somebody to the throne.
Yeah.
We'll restore someone to the throne. And then in the scene later, when she's got the knife to the officer's throat, spoilers.
Yep.
She says, I want the sword so I can rule. And she's, so she's still very zealous herself.
Well, she even says, she makes a reference to Gideon possessing something that belonged to me.
Yes.
Like and rightly so. I mean, in Star Wars Rebels, she's the last person we see wielding the Darksaber,
it's
right?
A gift. It's
a
gift, though.
So at some point, between the ending of Rebels and the unleashing of Sabine's weapon that we don't actually see, it somehow has changed hands, and now Moff Gideon, in fact, has it. So,
and that's the event that he talks about, like
the Night of 1,000 Tears.
There's Din Djarin. It's hard to call one guy the Mandalorian.
I know.
There's 4 in the episode now. It's wicked. Where he's saying, you can't. That planet is cursed. He believes some crazy esoteric crap. Like, he doesn't believe in the Force, or know what the Force is, but he thinks a planet can be cursed. That if you go there, you're going to die. And so they've told these children that there's, because they came from a place. And see, I watched the. Sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained.
No, it's okay.
I watched the finale episode from last season.
Yeah.
And there's a little exposition by Din while they're hunkered down, and he says, the reason that Gideon knows who I am is because I was on record in the records of Mandalore. So at some point he's officially Mandalorian too. Like, do you know what I mean? He's on record on Mandalore as being a Mandalorian.
I'm gonna have to go back and revisit that because I don't remember that exactly.
It's right after the scene, because it's so powerful. You get to see him as a child being pulled out, and then there's Mandalorians fighting battle droids everywhere. So
that's right.
When they cut back to him, he says, I was a child, I was a foundling, and I was taken to the fighting groups where I was trained.
Yeah, that's right.
And I was raised as a Mandalorian.
Yeah.
And the reason he knows who I am is because any trace of my being Mandalorian were destroyed with the records on Mandalore, and
right.
control of the Empire when they raided that. And so at some point, he, unless there's a continuity error there, and I think we're too crafty for that.
I don't know if it's a continuity error. I think maybe, if anything, it could be something along the lines of, Mandalorian as a religion, as an indoctrination, that maybe they did, keep records on that. Certainly the Death Watch, they operated on Mandalore, so no stretch of the imagination there.
And they had a homeworld. The Death Watch had their own homeworld, Concordia.
Yeah, that's right. Which was like a moon of Concord Dawn was a moon of Mandalore, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they had the Concord Dawn was destroyed, and I was thinking that perhaps in light of this, that Bo-Katan and the Night Owls, or what that part of Death Watch, or whatever they are, Axe Wolf's armor doesn't have any indicators, are the splinter group now. That the coverts of Mandalorians with this new rule may be the main Mandalorians.
Could they be, in fact, the majority?
It's a neat thought. And it does, I think that it's telling that the armor has spikes on her helmet.
Initially I wanted to just write that off as just being coincidence, but now, in light of what we know, yeah, it totally makes sense.
Bo-Katan really wants the Darksaber, and despite, all, like I say, like Paz Vizsla could be the rightful heir.
Yeah.
It's all about who wields the Darksaber. They're willing to follow Gar Saxon. They're willing to follow Darth Maul. And there's actually a part, I don't know if you ever read the Son of Dathomir comic.
I did not.
Crazy plot hole for me, and it's one of the bigger ones in Star Wars. It's that Almec, who's the Prime Minister of Mandalore.
Yep.
In the Clone Wars cartoon, Sidious comes to Mandalore, where Darth Maul has set up shop, and duels him. And imprisons him, lets him live and imprisons him, says he has different plans for him.
Yeah.
And there's also actually in a new novel or something that George Lucas was talking about. It's an old interview, but he's talking about his plans for the sequel trilogy would have involved Leia being eventually the chosen
I just
one.
read that. Yeah.
And the big baddie would have been Darth
Maul. Yeah, I just read that and I'm like, oh, how disappointing is that?
Yeah, right. And so after Maul's imprisoned by the Emperor, and there's a scene in the Son of Dathomir comic where Palpatine and Dooku are gloating.
Yeah.
And it's really making Maul mad because he's the apprentice, right?
Right.
he has this interaction with Dooku. I'm really digressing, but the point is that Olmec sends Gar Saxon and the Super Commandos
Yep.
and the precursor to Jodo Cast.
Yes.
I can't. It's a cast, clan cast guy.
Okay.
They go and they break Maul out of the prison and give him back the Darksaber and restore him to the leader. And why would the Prime Minister?
Why would you do that?
Do that?
Yeah.
When Gar Saxon, who eventually does take the
Has it? Yeah.
Why would they have gave it back to Maul? That's a weird choice considering who it's a very competitive field, if you will.
Yeah. Of course.
Anybody who wields the saber.
Yeah.
So right now, Gideon is the de facto ruler of Mandalore.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that was the big implication for me. I literally jumped out of my seat and like, Moff Gideon is Mandalore. Oh my God.
Yes.
I want to go back and talk about the armor for a second. And again, going back to that, you just made a reference about the armor doesn't really tell you anything, but at the same time, doesn't it though? Like the Paz Vizsla, the big heavy Mando, I mean, clearly he's got some replacement parts on there, but look at the color of his armor. It's very much in the Death Watch colors. I
agree with that.
I
absolutely agree with that.
None of the Death Watch markings, but even Bo-Katan and her crew are also wearing the Death Watch colors. I mean, she was in the Death Watch, so it makes perfect sense that, they still kept those colors.
It's true. And then there is the actual, like much later, there is the diametrical split of Death Watch, half following Pre Vizsla.
That's right.
Before his death, and half following Maul. And presumably, perhaps the followers of those two people kept going off in varying directions.
I think this is how we end up with the children of the Watch, and how, like I was saying,
I do too. But they are taken before Maul takes over. So that's
right. Yeah.
The timeline kind of idiosyncrasy there for me. But I feel strongly that there is some connection to the followers of Maul and the Armorer.
Yeah, totally. I'm curious to know if we're going to get that. I mean, on some level, I'm sure there's going to be some conflict on a bigger scale between, groups of Mandalorians and not just, Bo-Katan challenging, everything that Din Djarin has ever known about his life in one or two lines, which she does quite effectively, I might add.
No, it's true. She's a master manipulator.
Oh, big time.
She throws his brainwashing, which we see now sort of.
Yeah.
This is the way is almost like a control word. She uses it on him twice in the episode, and he just sort of snaps. Oh,
well, there's almost a duality there, because in the first instance where like it's, there's only one way, the way of the Mandalore, and then he leads with it. This is the way, and she responds to it. But the second time around is that, going back to that character development piece, when she leads with it, because she gives him that, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but she leads with that, your bravery will not be forgotten. And she says, basically alludes, there's a place for you. And she says it, and her tone is ever slightly different. This is the way, meaning there's another way. And he responds in kind. And to me, that's his acknowledgement of, yeah, maybe there is another way. Which is why I firmly believe that going forward, we're going to see a more softening of the Din Djarin character. And I think that maybe not by the end of this season, but going down the road, I do believe we're going to see an unmasked Din Djarin of his own will.
I do too. I've always thought in my head, just despite the cool factor, why would an actor who's a leading man
take a role where they can't see his face?
A role where you can't see his face.
That's a good point too. So getting back with the where we're at in the episode, I guess at this point, he has that. There's only one way, the way of the Mandalore, and away he and the child go. Holy cow! I was shocked to know that they didn't really make it that far from land.
No,
do you know what I mean? Like,
it's a pretty close From land, you're watching.
Less than a kilometer?
Which could explain why they show up so quick.
I guess so.
Looks way bigger. It looks way bigger out there.
You think that they've been steaming for hours, No, they just left 20 minutes ago, and they just made it this far.
So this is the tonal shift I was talking about with the crazy sunset and the naval missiles shooting out of it, or maybe similar to a shuttle launch.
Oh,
the,
yeah.
the contrails, right? And I thought that was a great.
I
It was
love that.
so diametrically opposed to the rest of the tone of the episode.
It was just such a beautiful shot, like the way that it was filmed. The three of them as he's standing there with the child and the sun's going down, and then like you say,
He's looking at them, list like
almost
wow, part of that.
Yeah, almost longingly, like, should I go with them? Right. And then the explosion and the sinking of the ship. And I thought, oh, that's just a cool moment. But then there's this long walk back into town, because by the time we get to the alley sequence, it's nighttime now. And Mando is accosted once again by another Quarren. You killed my brother.
I immediately couldn't help but hearing that song. It's from the early 90s. Hey, you, didn't you kill my brother? I sent you a link to it. You have to listen to it. It's crazy. I don't know how it couldn't be a nod to that song.
Yeah.
That phrase is repeated over and over and over in that song.
So, I mean, the fishing boat had at least 4, if not 5, Quarren on there. And we know from the descriptive video that at least 3 of them were brothers.
Right.
Here's brother number 4, at least 4. And he's showing up with a bunch of goons. And, he's going to exact some payback. And once again,
kill your pet.
Yeah, I'm going to kill your pet. Once again, we get the cavalry moment, and Bo-Katan and crew show up.
Makes more sense.
Yeah, but I mean, again, this is her this is like a real callback to the Bo-Katan we saw in Clone Wars and Rebels, and she's like, he didn't kill your brother, I did. The big F you. But there's a moment, was it I don't know if it was in the rescue when they pulled him out of the wet hold. There's a line.
Don't worry, brother. Someone
calls him brother.
Yeah.
Was it in that?
It's in the wet
Yeah.
hold.
Okay, it is there. Because I couldn't remember if it was here or if it was earlier. But yeah, more connective tissue between those characters. We take out the goons, and the conversation continues. Like, he's had some time to ruminate on it. I guess the walking has afforded him the time to digest everything she told him on the boat. And she's like, hey, can we at least buy you a drink? And then we get to continue that conversation back at the inn.
You're listening to Fandom Power.
Yeah, so at this point, they decide to go back to the inn, and Bo-Katan picks up the conversation pretty much where she left off on the boat, and she starts filling in even more of the plot holes. We learn that, again, that Trask is this, what did I say, it was a black market port. And here again, this goes back to what I was talking about before. She talks about how weapons are being bought and sold on Trask with the spoils that were taken from Mandalore. So that almost suggests to me like the whole Beskar as currency thing, as opposed to Beskar as a building material.
It's very true. The only time we see it, except for in armor, is in these ingots, and so it looks like that's one of the main things that the Empire did on Mandalore was like loot, the place, and also remove any threat to. Could be the motivation for going underground, in fact, to remove any threat to the Empire, because the Mandalorians certainly had the armor to deal with them.
Well, that lends itself to the next line of dialogue where it goes into that whole, she tells him that her intent to retake Mandalore, and, that's where he goes into how that planet's cursed, and anyone who goes there ends up dead. And she's like, he says, the line is, when the Empire couldn't control it, they made sure no one else could.
Got to be referring to Sabine's weapon.
That's what I wondered too, right? But again, I don't recall in Rebels they actually on the nose telling us what that weapon is or what it would do. She just kept referring to like how bad it is.
I believe there's a little exposition, and it's that it superheats and incinerates the wearer.
Okay, well that's
It's like a molecular thing.
that's rather horrific.
Yeah, it's rather horrific.
Yeah,
And we do see that in Rebels, there's a scene where Sabine's mom and Tristan, her brother, survive. They run to the she's warning them. They run to so it's the machine has a limit, like it's like a diameter, if you will.
Okay, yeah.
And but all the other Mandalorians their armor is fine, but they're all reduced to ash.
Right,
So certainly it would have been easy for the Empire to run around just picking up armor and turning it into ingots for currency. And it's a nod to The Last Jedi and how they talk about how the galaxy is a lot like Earth, and that there are arms dealers out here that have no allegiance. And so they'll sell to the highest bidder, and you have the Empire here actually having to do rebel style stuff.
Yeah,
and,
really, it's
buy weapons off the black market.
Huge contrast to the earlier seasons of Rebels, where it's like ragtag wherever we can get it from. How the roles have reversed.
Yeah, it's great. It's a who's watching the watchers. It's a nice role reversal.
For sure it is. But then Bo-Katan just responds to him with, don't believe everything you've heard. And she's got that sly look like, like you said, he's been lied to. And I think this is just another one of those lies. So the question is,
she tells him earlier that she fought in the Purge.
Yeah. Who's put that train of thought in his head that, it's cursed and anyone who goes there dies? And again, this is where I wonder if this is just, over successive generations of the Death Watch, as their numbers dwindled and less naturally born Mandalorians and more indoctrinated religious zealots, somebody had to start the lie somewhere, and now it's been told so much that they just believe it.
Well, and certainly if you were a race of faceless Mandalorians, you could never step foot on the homeworld.
No, you're absolutely right.
And be sort of diametrically opposed with the ideologies that are inherent there, but you could seriously co-opt all that sort of stuff and have a nomad race.
So it just kind of struck me now as I wonder, what are the chances that Moff Gideon is a naturally born Mandalorian?
Ooh.
Who just bought so hard into the whole Imperial, into Comp Nor and the whole, the new Imperial.
And having said that, it also maybe might lead to other connotations of Jango or Boba being natural-born Mandalorians, because we're not expressly told that they're not, but
that's right.
That this culture, and if it's split 800 years before the Battle of Yavin, the ideological split, perhaps Jango Fett is Mandalorian by birth and not by nature.
Who knows?
It's kind of neat. It adds depth there for sure. Being two types, and one of them being that anybody could be a Mandalorian. Certainly, we see Jango take his helmet off, though. Yeah.
I'm certainly, going back to the whole Fett connection, I really hope that, that walk off into the sunset moment is not the only time we see this character. I really think there's an opportunity to build him as, he's the potential to be a very powerful ally or a powerful enemy. And I'm not 100% sure which way that's going to go, but he needs more screen time. Absolutely.
Agree. Maybe they could be just dangling one, like an after credit scene to sort of like tease us about the next season or something, or hopefully they don't decide to tell the Boba Fett story first and then bring him back. But
no, I would like to see that. I'd like to see some resolution to his character arc throughout The Mandalorian.
Certainly, and they have a lot going on this season now. I mean, they drop Ahsoka Tano's name, and now so there's so much going on that I'll be fairly impressed if it's wrapped up in a neat bow in the next
5 episodes. 5 episodes, yeah.
Yeah, almost halfway.
So Bo-Katan suggests to Din Djarin that in any event that Mandalorians are stronger together. And here she goes once again challenging his belief system and planting that seed for him to swing the other way, which I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think he's going to swing by the series conclusion, if not long before that.
It all depends on what side of the line she swung to. Like if the theory that the Death Watch proper, the Night Owls proper, are the splinter group, perhaps it's maybe it's her that is the antagonist.
Well, here's an important point to note about the Night Owls. The Night Owls specifically were an all-female band.
Yes.
She's not traveling solely with females. She's got Wove. What's the character's name?
Axe Wove.
She's got Axe Wove with him, and just from the table talk, he's one of them. So they must all be naturally born, or at least they could be foundlings as well, but they don't share the same religious zeal towards the warrior way.
Well, there is a stroke of, if we go back to when they first take their helmets off, there's a line when she says the children of the Watch are religious zealots that broke away from Mandalorian society. Their goal was to reestablish the ancient way. She looks down at the child.
Oh yeah.
Looks up at the man. Like there's a where she like specifically looks at the child.
Well, I mean,
about the ancient ways.
Of course, she looks at the child.
The ancient ways were at war with the Jedi.
And what's funny though is that does anybody remember that Bo-Katan's met Yoda?
This is it. This is it.
Bo-Katan has met Yoda, and staring down at that little green nugget there, like you can't tell me that she's not going, oh.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah. So yeah, don't believe everything you've heard referring to Mandalore as a cursed world. And then, he's like, well, that's not part of my plan. And he reasserts his mission to reunite the child with the Jedi. And then she just lays it out for him like, hey man, what do you know about the Jedi?
Nothing.
And that's, I don't know anything. Well, that gives her a little bit of leverage because she's like, listen, I can help you, but before we do that, you've got to help me. And she lays out her plan. And her plan is to basically hijack a Gozanti cruiser.
So nice.
Yeah, and Gozanti cruisers made their debut in Rebels. Cool little. They're not. I don't know what they call them, cruisers, but really they're more like heavy freighter almost.
In Rebels they were carrying chicken walkers, and they were carrying ties.
Yeah, four ties. Yeah,
2 bombers.
Yeah, exactly.
This one is just all weapons. They kind of talk about it.
Yeah, they were kind of used as like system patrol craft. Like you couldn't deploy a garrison with them, but I mean they were big enough and they were robust enough that they could do like planetary defense, or they could do system patrol and just act as a scout ship.
They're quick too. They have 3 hyperdrive engines.
Yeah. And you can't tell me that the depiction of this thing is the gnarliest looking ship yet. I mean, I just love the translation from the smooth panel lines of the animation model to this like more chunky, almost like the stuff you'd see. Very much looks like a practically built model, with all the kibble and the greeblies all over it, even though, it's mostly just like, uneven panel depths, I guess, on the surface of the hull.
That's certainly how you build that up. Yeah, it's perfect. And this part here too, when they're like surveying the Gozanti, and they pan back and they're all on the roof of the crest,
the Razor Crest, yeah,
and Mando and Bo-Katan are talking in the background, and the other 2 characters are like squatted and laying down.
Yep,
that was the most Rebels thing I've seen yet.
Oh yeah, very much. Now that you mentioned that,
actually my favorite. If I pause that, like I want it to be my screenshot for my phone.
Oh,
that's
cool.
My favorite visual I've gotten in 2 seasons.
Yeah, where they're just kind of lounging around, and it's just like
such a Rebels thing.
Yeah, like
so perfect.
Like just like troops, kind of like, hey, before we go out, we're just going to review the plan, but not in a formal way. Just kind of talk about
exactly. And it lends that nearly every mission that the Phoenix Squadron goes on starts like that, with a casual, almost let's get a look at what we're doing in a very like ragtag. We're on the fly. Here's our plan. Let's hack it out. Let's do it.
Yeah.
That was my favorite visual actually I've gotten into the whole thing, and there's been some really cool ones. We blew up a crate dragon.
So there's a couple of things in this sequence, the leading up to the assault on the actual ship itself, where they were kind of head scratchers for me. One is the whole plan itself hinges on the fact that the Imperials are going to stay at a certain altitude and a certain speed until they've cleared the shipping lane. And I'm thinking,
for me, that lends like that they're just customers.
Yeah.
Like they have to adhere to the same, you're coming in too hot. They got to adhere to the same rules. They
Yeah.
have the transponders going. Like, if they don't toe the line, they're not going to get service.
I guess so. I mean, but maybe for me, it's because there's no consequence. Like, they don't explain, you got to stay at this speed, at this altitude, or what. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's a good point.
And even later in the episode, when, the word is given, go into orbit now. And he's like, sir, do it now. And there's no consequence. So I'm like, well, okay, I guess it's just sort of a neat writing trick to just make sure that we can get on the ship.
But
So
it does lend itself to the kind of stupid plot point from Rise of Skywalker where the fleet couldn't deploy around the galaxy.
Oh, I know.
So
Yeah.
It all cleared the atmosphere. Every single one of them.
Why is we're all
crawling on repulsor lifts?
Yes, we're just sitting there.
The SDF-1 got up faster.
I know. Nice. So true, right? And then the other thing is, so we have this cool, like, I love the scene of the four of them rocketing off, chasing this thing down. I mean, that just looks so awesome.
Fantastic.
And the landing, the visual on that, like, I know we talked about it in the Marshall, like the wire work and how good it looked, but that paled in comparison to the four of them landing on the hull of this thing. And again, I don't know how much of that was practical versus CG, but like, to me, it was absolutely beautiful the way that they did that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
For me, there was a great action figure nod here, because I don't know how many times I'd have a capital ship flying around, but there'd be stormtroopers standing on the top of it.
Oh, neat.
So that was such an action figure nod to me. Like, yeah,
Cool.
like there needs to be figures on the outside of the ship.
Well,
that was great. The little sentry guys.
that's another thing that bothered me. What reason are there stormtroopers on the outside of that ship?
Is it pirates again?
I guess, that
Reputation.
if
of the
you
planet,
had to,
maybe.
if you had to
That's
give
the
it to me
line.
in a single line,
Pirates again.
yeah, pirates again. Okay, so you know what? That totally clears that up for me. I guess I was just too thick to pull that one out.
It's a big episode. There's so much going on.
I know. Really like that part though. They clear the guys off the deck, and there's this cool thing I want to talk about. I'm gonna get ahead of myself, but I'm gonna talk about it now because it plays out 2 or 3 times through the episode. There's this, I don't know if I would call it Bo-Katan's theme, but there's a piece of music that plays every time that those three go into action. And it's such a contrast from the Mandalorian theme, which is like so organic and kind of woodwinded, and that right? It's so different. This is like this electronic, almost like a dance beat, like I just love that, how it just lend to the
very mechanical sounding.
Yeah, very electronica. So to me, that totally amped me up, and I was right there like, oh yeah, we're going to get an action bit here. But if that's Bo-Katan's theme, I want more of that. That's so cool.
That's real cool.
So we bust into the ship with, and I love this, a scomp link, like a handheld scomp link, which we've seen before. We've only really seen them on droids before, whether it's R2 or in the wrist of K2SO or those security droids. Cool to know that there's a handheld version of that.
Makes sense.
It's almost like a lockpick, locksmith's tools, I guess. But I digress. We bust our way into the ship, and holy running firefight.
Run and gun.
Yeah, but it's not the run and gun that we got from the Passenger, where it's this like panic, escape vibe. This is a deliberate, we're on the assault, more so than in the Prisoner from season 1, where it was just droid security that they had to overcome.
You really get the sense too that these other three are crack shots.
Oh my God, yeah.
Especially, we just go back to where they defeat the brothers.
Yeah.
In the ambush at the dockyard at night. They just, it's like one shot kills there.
Oh, absolutely, it was.
They explode as a squadron and they collapse back together as a squad. Like they fight together. Like,
yeah,
amazing.
I really got that right from the get go. Like Andy had said, from the drop kick to, even though the perspective was much more condensed, you just got this sense of like, oh, they fight much differently than Din Djarin does. And then to see them in these hallway shots, and the three of them, how it's a concert of movements, and it's all complementary. It's
and noticeably Din Djarin is like a step behind.
Oh, very much so. He's almost the support in this one. Not the, like, he's not keeping up with them.
Yeah.
Well, he's got he's missing his rifle.
Yeah.
And he's got it's like one blaster, and he's holding it like a 6-shooter, if you will, almost like he's got low tech compared to these guys. You notice that the Axe Wove character has blasters in his wrist.
Yeah, I did notice that.
The earlier when they did the first cavalry run.
He's also carrying the same, if not the same, a very similar model blaster to what we see Sabine wield in Rebels. Has that very distinctive profile with the angle at the end of the barrel. So I think that's super cool.
Super cool. Love the details.
So there's this moment where we fight our way through, and they make a couple of jokes in this episode about stormtroopers not being able to shoot, and
couldn't hit the side of a bantha. But at the same time, though, I mean, they sure could hit the side of a Mandalorian in this one.
Yeah, well, I thought that maybe the show is kind of, they've played the joke before with Jason Sudeikis' cameo as the scout trooper when they couldn't hit the piece of garbage on the ground, right? I mean, haha. But by and large, these troopers, to my way of thinking, if they can't shoot for accuracy, they are certainly exceptional at suppression fire.
Oh yeah. And then when they start handing out the heavy armaments and like heavy shots there.
I made a note of that they switched up their E11s to repeating blasters.
Oh yeah.
And I think we saw those back in Rogue One. I think some of the shore troopers may have been armed with those.
That's correct.
But I like the idea that, they actually like, oh, we need more firepower. Like that moment where it's like, is it pirates? It's pirates. Oh my God, there's like at least 10 of them. And then the co-pilot says to the captain, sir, it's only 4 life signs.
That's a great, that's great timing. And also, like, and then the guy in the back is panicking.
Yeah, the panic. They're Mandalorians. Ah! And then the comlink cuts out. Funny moment too. They fight their way back. And when you think about it in terms of like, if you were boarding a ship and you had to clear it, I mean, you've got to go from one end to the other. And, they make the decision to clear the back end of the ship out first because that's where the cargo is. Funny moment though, where, I can't think of his name. Oh, this is where we were getting into that. You had mentioned offline, Hank, about who we thought the deck officer character was. And
that's right.
And I didn't think it was the Quarren fellow. I thought it was this Imperial officer.
Yeah, it makes more sense. And in fact, you're absolutely correct.
But they fight their way to the back end. And I mean, you can tell like he's not up for this fight. Before the door ever opens, he's nervous. But the doors blow open, and on the first like laser or blaster bolt, he's like, close the door. He
shoots once. Actually, I watched it a few times. He only shoots once. He takes one shot and then goes, oh,
close the door. He's clearly not up for it. I think, Andy, did you get the
deck officer is played by Kevin Dorff.
Kevin Dorff.
Noted for Brooklyn Nine-Nine and The Office.
Who was he? I've watched every episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I'm going to have to go back and see who he was in that.
It's like a minor character. In The Office, he's the guy that quits in an episode. He's just all of a sudden he's there and he quits. It's kind of funny.
But I just love his, it's comedic, but he doesn't play it. He doesn't play it as comedy. He plays it straight because he's legitimately scared.
He's panicking.
Yeah. I mean, and then of course they lock themselves in the cargo hold and then calls up to the cockpit to tell the captain, We've trapped them. You've trapped them where? In the cargo control area.
Classic
The
incompetent
what?
employee.
Yeah, really. And of course he even says that. He does the double take. You've trapped them where? And I mean, no sooner does he say the cargo control area and they're vented out the back end of the ship.
Insert Wilhelm.
Yes. Yeah. I found that to be completely funny because, I thought, back in the days of playing the role-playing game extensively, I thought I was the only one who ever vented people out.
Yeah, it's so good. So good.
There's an awesome line where, after the static breaks and they've lost contact with everybody, the co-pilot, he's like, come in. And Bo-Katan has a comlink and she's like, I'm here. And she says, what does she say? She says, put some tea on. We'll be up in a minute.
Yeah, we're coming up. It's so good. That's such a great line. Like,
yeah.
she's completely in control of the situation.
I get why they cast. I mean, even going back to her initial casting back in the animation. I mean, not to say that she was typecast, but I mean, certainly Katie Sackhoff has sort of, been subjected to some typecasting that she plays these hard ass female characters, like Starbuck, Starbuckian like characters. Even her guest starring in the last Riddick movie was a similar character.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like her as Bo-Katan, but seeing her in live action, I can't help but go back and make the Starbuck analogy, and it doesn't take me out of it, but it's like, I kind of hope that she would, not do like a little less Starbuck and a little more of what we saw in the animated series.
She delivers several lines of spot on, especially that little T line.
Yeah.
She sounds a lot more like the animated character with her helmet on too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I was just like, I got to get my wife some Mandalorian armor, bro.
Nice. So there's
She's
a
sexy in this.
There's a callback here where the initial deal was not to I guess I goofed that. She didn't present the mission as taking the ship. She presented it as taking the weapons.
Yeah.
Yes.
But now it's like we're taking the whole ship, and there's this callback moment. It's very reminiscent of the Lando Vader moment in Empire, where you're changing the terms of the deal.
I thought we were going to get the second line, actually.
Yeah, really.
I'm glad we didn't.
Yeah. If you want my help finding the Jedi, you'll help me take this ship, is her answer.
Yeah. And it shows you again that everybody's living in a bargaining world.
Yeah. So now, of course, we've got to fight our way up to the front of the ship. And I find it funny at this point, it's like back in season 1 when Greef Karga flips sides and he decides that he's actually going to help the Mandalorian, and they come up with that harebrained plan to go back into town, and he's like, well, how many stormtroopers are there? And he's like, oh, maybe a squad, the town is like overrun with troopers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing in this episode, and he's like, well, how many? And she's like, oh, maybe a squad. There's way more than a squad's worth of troops on this ship.
Early on in the first season 2, how many stormtroopers? Only 4, and then there turns out to be 10. So, it's a running gag.
Yeah, it's absolutely a running gag. Love the sorry, this is, I guess, kind of taking a step back, but I love the stormtrooper across the windshield gag.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Yeah. So now the ship captain, I got this one, Titus Welliver.
Mm-hmm.
Who's only listed as the captain. He doesn't really have a name. Also of Deadwood fame.
Yes.
At this point realizes he's in trouble, and so he puts in a distress call to none other than Moff Gideon. And Moff Gideon says, he actually makes that line, are these the same pirates? And they say that they believe so. So I guess that lends some credibility or some credence to...
They've been taking stuff back for a while.
They've been operating there for a while. And that was a big question I had. Like, it ties into that. How did they know to follow him? And, how long have they been there?
Operating very much like the rebels did in the early days.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, this is the thing. I mean, if they took the ship, I guess it's really inconsequential in the grand scheme of things. But it's like, did they not have their own ship to get there in the first place? Did they buy passage? Did they all wear black hooded robes over top of their armor to conceal their armor like Sasha Banks?
Maybe they're at the point, though, they've taken enough stuff. They knew like they need that freighter.
It's entirely possible. You can't tell me that they're not going to use the ship in some way, shape, or form. And I mean, the Rebellion is just as guilty of doing the same thing. They in Rebels, they steal what? I can't think of the name of the ship. Essentially, it's an aircraft carrier.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's a fine line between freedom fighter and terrorist.
Isn't it, though? So the Moff basically, asks the captain, how much have you lost? And the captain reports that, virtually the whole ship has been taken except us in the cockpit. And he tells him that, support is not an option, and leaves him with this "you know what to do" line, which is punctuated with this kind of final "long live the Empire."
That's such a good. I don't know where I've seen that reference before. I don't think I found it before, but it's such a good line. It's simple. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Great.
To me, there's almost a sarcasm the way that the line is delivered, like "long live the Empire," like you're fucked. You are, and this is what you're resigned to, so get on with it.
It's fantastic.
So
Gideon certainly doesn't pull punches.
No, he doesn't. And neither does the captain in this case, as he draws his blaster and wastes the pilot and the co-pilot. And
they know it's coming too, actually.
Well, yeah,
they're nervous about that conversation.
You got to wonder what it's like being a young Imperial officer in this time frame where everything.
You're either going to die or you're going to be a general in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Admiral Piet.
Exactly. Takes the Gozanti and throws it into a suicide dive.
Must have had the comms turned off because they didn't tell him he was coming in too hot.
No, they did. Was there no?
Good point. No.
Yeah, I guess so. That's funny. So then there's this whole, again, the run and gun thing where we've now turned our attention to, we've got to get into the cockpit. And this is where like the stormtroopers are now, wielding their light repeating blasters. One guy though is definitely carrying the heavy blaster from that we see the sand troopers carry in A New Hope. But they are totally suppressed and they're pinned down. And again, I think, I can't decide if this is a character development thing for him or just, somebody who's, as a bounty hunter who's self-sufficient, who's probably used to working alone. I mean, it's almost like it's so reckless what he does when he takes those detonators off of his belt, yells, "Cover me," and then charges into the fray. And if there was ever any doubt about, the gag about getting shot every episode, like this makes up for every time that he's missed one.
Oh, for sure. Because
I stopped counting at 6 or 7 shots.
He goes down.
Yeah, he does. And it's not a case of he dives to the floor. He's dropped.
Oh, yeah.
Tosses the detonators into the doorway and boom, takes out the troopers. But amazingly, recovers almost immediately.
The Beskar is hell of a shit.
I guess so.
Heavy blasters are DL-19s, by the way.
Okay, cool. I guess I'm thinking of the one that the one blaster that looks like the German. Oh, it's the one that's based on the German machine gun. It's a World War II gun. I can't think of it. But anyway, you know the one I'm talking about.
I do, yeah.
Force our way into the cockpit, and immediately Din Djarin and Koska head right to the flight controls and start trying to pull the Gozanti out of the nosedive, while Axe kind of just stands in the doorway, and then we have this, good Lord, I'm tripping on my own tongue. Bo-Katan and the captain have that moment in the corner where they pull him aside, and she
wants info.
Oh my God, yeah, and I mean
the gauntlet played out.
Yeah. Really credible in
Saber Cyclone style.
Super credible in how angry she plays that moment. Like, where is it, or where is he, or where is it? Does he still have it? Yeah, exactly.
I'm not sure, but
right.
His line in back is very telling too. If you're asking that question,
you already know. Yeah. So, I mean, that just makes me like, we know that it's very suggestive that there's going to be a confrontation between her and him.
It's true. It's very true. And if there was any other questions about, like certainly Ahsoka may still have lightsabers, but there's an interesting point my wife brought up, is that Sabine, if Sabine does show up in this show, and it's very likely that it could happen, Sabine has Ezra's lightsaber.
That's right.
And so we could be headed towards some lightsaber duels here.
And she does have some rudimentary training from Kanan.
Yeah, absolutely. I would almost put her force sensitive.
It's entirely possible. We have this period of about, it's been like 5 years, right? So, we don't know what Ahsoka and Sabine have been doing in the interim when they went off to search for Ezra.
In the epilogue that takes place after Return of the Jedi and
That's
Rebels,
right.
where Ezra leaves a message for everyone. And the message for Sabine is, I'm counting on you.
That's right.
And she's like been told this before, because she says, you're counting on me. I know. I don't know what that means. But I think it actually might mean that Ahsoka is going to train her, and that he's counting on her
to carry on
Jedi forward.
I never even considered that, to be honest.
Yes, sir.
I took it more from the perspective of like Sabine was a quasi-romantic interest for him, even though they never played it out as much as they could have. Towards the end, they started developing that like there's more than they're just good buddies. And I thought, I'm counting on you was a nod to you'll come get me.
Oh, that's possible. That's a possible way to interpret it. Yeah.
I thought so anyway. But again, maybe that's just me not looking deep enough, or
no, it's nice that we have two different angles on that one.
Yeah, I just thought it was the romantic connection speaking through, where like, there's more to what we have, and I'm counting on you to come get me so that we can explore that later.
See, except for the message there, I know we're way off track now, but except for the message that Ezra leaves, leading you to believe that there's some way for them to go get him.
Yeah.
Him and Thrawn leap through hyperspace without a windshield.
That's right, because the space whales have punctured it.
I'm saying they're dead.
It's entirely, yeah. But is anybody really ever dead in Star Wars now?
That's a true story.
Yeah.
True story.
Yeah.
You might get Maul in the Mandalorian with robotic arms. Wicked.
Interesting sort of turn of events in this one. It reminded me of an old-timey spy thriller movie where, you've got the villain on the ropes, and, you're about to make him divulge his evil plan. And it's almost that you can almost hear like the henchman laugh as they bite down on the cyanide capsule.
Oh, and he says the classic line, I'm more afraid of my boss than I am of you.
Yeah, she's like, he says, you may let me live, but he won't.
Certainly.
And then does the big gnash down with his teeth. But
and there's a nod to the Emperor's force lightning, because his skull.
Oh, the glowing
flickers and that purple almost force lightnings. Fantastic.
I put it in my notes as some kind of quasi-electrocution, whether it was a capsule in his mouth or built into his dental work. But yeah,
in
some
the
kind of
audio, it's called a suicide. So I'd have to look it up again. It's called a suicide something.
Sure. But essentially, sends enough electricity, I'm assuming, to his brain to kill him.
Mm.
We managed to pull the Gozanti out of the suicide dive, kind of last minute thing, and really cool action shot of the ship skimming the water and then coming out of the dive and gaining altitude again.
Din really is a hell of a pilot. I mean, we've seen him do some crazy stuff.
Well, you have to wonder that if he didn't have Koska in the other chair, would he have been able to do it on his own?
No, it's true. It seems, and even Frog Lady in the initial.
Exactly, like holding the
here, hold this.
Yeah, holding the throttle or one of the controls back. Interesting contrast though for her too, where her attention is split between helping him and making sure that the brood container does not topple over and spill or break.
Oh, it's certainly reinforcing the parenting theme.
Yeah.
And I think that's amazing. It's strong. We should keep it up.
So at this point, the Bo-Katan and crew are about to take off with the ship, and again, going back into that, this is where they have that moment where we've now challenged the Mandalorians. Basically, his entire way of life has been challenged twice now in the episode, and is about to get challenged that third time, where this is where she says that line about, there's a place for you and your bravery will not be forgotten. Because she says, you sure you won't come with us? And again, he's like, no, I've got stuff I've got to do. Okay, well, your bravery won't be forgiven. And this is the counterpoint where she leads with, this is the way. But the way that she says it is this suggestive way. Mm. And I know she's saying this is the way, but in my mind, I'm hearing there is another way. And she's just opened that door, and all he's got to do is step through it now.
It's a cool interpretation. Certainly she gives him all the information that he needs to seemingly do the next step in his quest.
Right.
Even naming our heroine.
That's right. So, I mean, what does she tells him?
She says, go to the city of Caladan on the forest planet of Corvus and find Ahsoka Tano.
Yeah. So that's a huge, huge name drop. I mean, I think all of us as fans of the animation, we've been clamoring for this for years now. What would a live action Ahsoka Tano not only look like, but how would they be characterized? And now there's no doubt in anybody's mind that we're going to get that in some shape or form. She's
100% the best character that's considered periphery.
Oh yeah, totally.
In my opinion, the best character, the most well-rounded. She has the best arc. She's tragic. She's a gifted combatant. She's morally true.
Yep.
She's a fantastic character, and especially Lauren says it all the time. If she had Sabine Wren and Ahsoka Tano when she was a little girl, her life would have been a lot different.
Oh, cool! That's so cool to have that connection with those characters. I mean, even Dave Filoni, who created that character, part of the reason for bringing her back for Clone Wars was she was so unresolved. Bring her back for Rebels was because her arc was so unresolved at the end of Clone Wars. And I mean, how do you just let that character go when there's so much more to say about her, when she has so much more to do to advance the story?
He must have had tears in his eyes doing
my God.
Yeah. After such a big break, to finally give that, at least that part of that chapter of her some closure, because that was so powerful.
Yeah. So I think, what did I say in my notes here? Oh yeah. She tells Din his bravery will not be forgotten, speaks the Mando creed, this is the way, and Mando answers in kind. It's important. This is important because it shows an acknowledgement on Din Djarin's part to the truth that Bo-Katan had told him earlier. I think as the show progresses, he will eventually sway towards the Night Owls and renounce the Children of the Watch, especially when he gets more guidance from a character like Ahsoka.
His armor could use some paint.
Oh, it totally could use some paint. And then we get to have one more visit with Frog Mom and Frog Dad.
Fantastic.
We kind of skipped over where he dropped him off.
Oh, we did gloss over that.
Yeah.
Oh, so there's an important piece of dialogue there, I think.
There is.
He tells him to mind his manners, behave, and you know what I'm talking about.
You know what I'm talking about.
Suggesting that Mando thinks that the child understands him.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, it could be like when every morning before I go to work, my wife leaves before I do, so the last thing I do before I shut the door for the day is I tell my dog to be a good girl.
Of course.
But it could be like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's deeper. He literally says in the inn to the bartender, I'd like a bowl of chowder for my friend.
For my friend, yeah.
Yeah, so
I think it leans into what we were talking about last week about, his advancement in terms of, we've seen advancement in his language ability. So certainly this connects it with the cognitive side of things. Like, he is a more developed character now.
It makes sense from a creator's standpoint that you would introduce him at a point with which he's going to make a dramatic shift quickly.
Yep.
You wouldn't, if you introduced him 2 years ago, we'd have to wait 4 years for him to talk.
No, exactly.
If you introduced him 2 years from now, we'd miss that transition. So it's probably very deft on the part of the creators.
I think it, adding to that, contrasting to how pervasive that the joke was about him getting into the eggs, and even after being told no, he does it anyway. And even in the final shot of the passenger where he pops an egg out of his robe and shoves it in his mouth, like, haha, I did it anyway. Mm-hmm. He's proven his capacity to be mischievous.
Right. But I think he evolves in this episode.
Absolutely. Look at it's almost like he was sharing in that tender moment with the offspring, with the parents.
He was there at the moment of birth, and there may actually have been some sort of recognition about life there. It was food before, but now it's life.
Yeah.
There's a close-up on the egg, and you see inside that egg, it's now little frog dude.
Yeah, and then it busts open, and it's Tadpole.
And look is not, they almost give him a look of hunger in the last episode when he's peering through the glass, and this is a look of joy.
Yeah, it's so different.
In the concept art at the end, he's actually cradling the thing in his lap.
Oh, I missed that part.
Yeah.
I got to start watching these credits more closely because I just kind of, by the time I get to the end of the episode, and I'm like, I just want to watch it again. You know what I mean?
It's true. I watched this one pretty much nonstop. I had to take a break and just put on something. I think I've watched a couple episodes of Family Guy to just sort of like almost like
cleanse your brain.
Water when you're eating sushi, cleanse your palate. But I woke up this morning at like 8 o'clock and started watching it again, and I was watching it at 11:30, quarter to 12 when you called.
Yeah.
This was a highly watchable episode.
Oh, totally. I mean, you've got a just over 30 minutes of so much jam packed in there, and it's not just. I found this one had less. I mean, there was certainly a fair share of like visual cues and callbacks and stuff, but like holy plot advancement, Batman.
Right, and nuanced too. So they've like listened to us. They've dangled so many things that
I know.
They're like our brains, our mouths are watering with the potential of what they've dropped here.
I guess we should probably let's just finish out the episode itself, and then let's talk about sort of implications and then where it's going. Picks up the child. Cool little nod though. Did you notice like how much time do we think passed over the course of this episode? 1 day?
Maybe 2.
The growth rate between tadpole to tadpole in a bowl with legs overnight. So
yeah, absolutely.
Apparently, frog couples species grows very quickly.
And the sort of a point that only one hatched, which is the reason for the needing so many.
I guess so. I never put that together that there was only one
nature,
viable.
Lauren made this point too. In nature, very few, they lay clutches of hundreds of eggs because one or two make it.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's evolutionary that you lay so many eggs.
We've seen that with turtles. I know it's not exactly the same thing, but Kim and I watched on the side of the road one day. We watched a snapping turtle. We counted lay in excess of like 50 eggs, but most of them end up as food.
It's an evolutionary trait.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're not going to progress if you don't do that, and they've evolved to do that. It's kind of a neat, actually, a little deep nod there. Actually,
well, I guess the principle is the same, right? Success by numbers, really.
And it lends gravitas to the fact that she's protecting these eggs.
Yeah.
Because only one might make it.
So going on to the egg thing, the amount of backlash that's come up in the last week, and we've all read about it. Lots of opinions online about the
implications of genocide.
Yeah, the implications of that and the morality of the child. And a lot of people were upset thinking that, the child is a sentient creature and should have known better. And I disagreed with that because I think we'd established that intellectually he's 18 months old. How do you put an adult sense of morality on that?
Can't fault a child for being hungry.
I've had this sort of, not an argument, but a discussion with my wife where she skews him quite older in terms of some of his stuff. Like she's saying that an 18-month-old doesn't unscrew a knob from a console and start playing with it.
I would argue that that's not entirely impossible.
And so would I. But there is a sect of fandom out there that skews him a little older in terms of his development. Because at 50, and if Yoda's 800, 50 is a significant chunk.
It is.
Of that. But I agree with you in terms of that. And I also, it was one of the reasons that I shifted him morally from good to sort of almost chaotic, not chaotic, but chaotic good. Not shifting in his alignment in terms of his goodness, but shifting in his alignment in terms of being more of a chance taker. He's picking up. I mean, Din Djarin does a lot of killing.
That's right.
Right, he does. He is the moral compass, and the child is going to learn from that. And if it's as innocuous as stabbing a squid in a bowl with a thing, or blowing up 40 stormtroopers with singing birds just to get out of a tight situation. That the child is going to absorb this morality for sure. But at this point, I think it's fairly safe to assume that he's a normal developing child.
I think so.
Very neutral stance.
And that statement throws back to last episode where he fires off the jetpack, and the kid looks at him. He's like, "What?"
Yeah.
Well, there's a scene where he closes the pram and. Because he's about to fire the whistling birds in that first episode.
That's right.
And that's one of Lauren's arguments that he's older. Like an 18-month-old wouldn't recognize that's about to happen.
I don't know. It's the whole touch the hot burner.
Yeah, it's semantics.
Yeah.
It's neat. It's neat that we're getting there with that, though.
Yeah.
If you're scared, press the button.
Again, I guess it really just boils down to nature versus nurture, and that whole, you may not be intentionally trying to teach your kids certain behaviors, but they will pick it up just based on observation.
At the end of the day, we're anthropomorphizing a puppet.
No. Oh, so that's great segue though. Like we've talked extensively about how much you can get out of a faceless character, how much a mask can emote. But like, holy cow, talk about what you can get out of this puppet, this animatronic device, which is, I mean, yes, it's supposed to be able to do all these things, but it is doing it in spades.
I've never said this out loud. I mean, I said it to my wife, but doesn't he remind you as if they might have shaved down Gizmo from Gremlins?
Well,
it's like they picked the best elements of the cutest things in the 90s or the 80s and it's an amalgam of it's got a Furby connotation to it.
Yeah.
I heard in an interview, and I probably read it in an interview with Jon Favreau, that some of the early versions of this were so cute that they had to dial it back.
Oh wow!
That it was distractingly cute.
Yeah,
they had to no, we need to bring it way back, or nobody else is going to do anything fun with this character.
So finally, we pick up the child, we head back over to the dock, and Mando is once again met by Boston whaler longshoreman. And he's just standing there looking at the Razor Crest, and it is literally tied together with baler wire and fish netting. And he's like, I gave you 1,000 credits, and this is the best you could do.
And he just holds up the thing. Here, sign here.
Yeah, sign here.
It's so good. And now it's starting to look more like his armor used to look, because it's got yellow patches and pink and green, and it's starting to look more like his armor used to look.
It's very, very piecemeal. I almost, that's one of the things sort of I'm questioning sort of going forward is like, it's still like a rickety bucket of bolts ready to fly apart at any second. Are we going to get an overhaul anytime soon? Like
he's paying Pelly's rent.
I guess so. Is he going to go back
to Tatooine?
He's going to backtrack.
So he's going to have to bring her on board to keep up with this madness.
Yeah. So we get one more little, I guess it's a bit of a tension piece, but then it's broken with a little bit of comedy where, as we're pulling away and he's saying, hey, I finally know where to take you. I know where we're going. And he's cursing, oh, Mon Calamari, as he's reaching between the lines to operate the controls. Yeah. Yeah. I talked to Andy about this, and we both agree that may be a baby Mamakor crawling up the line.
No, yeah, we don't see enough of the big one, but it does have the mouth in the correct location.
Yeah. If
it's
I had
not the squid from the soup,
it's definitely not that. But again, so you have this moment, the thing, which for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to call it a baby Mamakor, climbs up the line, and it's this moment. The baby core, yeah. Is it going to eat him or not? And, Space Dad at the last second snatches it midair, and yeah, I assume he crushes it or whatever, but, and then we have the comedic moment where he's eating it, right? So we finally get to see him, because that was like, hey, I'll get you something to eat from the beginning of the episode. And we don't see him eat anything until now in the last seconds of the episode.
It's pretty great.
And that's a quick flip, though, right? Because the Mamakor eats him, and now he's eating the Mamakor.
Yeah, so, I mean, is that a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge? And again, just like the innkeep, hey, was that baby Mamakor stolen away, or was it planted there? I guess we'll never know.
Could have come aboard when they sunk the first time, but
yeah. And then we get the.
It seems fishy.
It does seem fishy. Razor Crest jaunts off into hyperspace, leaving a panel behind.
Love
you
it.
know,
Just spinning in space there.
Yeah.
I love how they hold on that for a second.
Like,
that's fantastic.
Oh, the whole takeoff is like the whole thing is shaking, and he's like,
it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Again, like thinking this thing's going to fly apart at any second. Like that.
This is Bryce Dallas Howard's second episode. And
yes.
She's really good at action, man.
Yeah.
Remember the Raider? She had the Raider in the night and all the villagers fighting in that.
That's right.
Episode. She's super good at directing action.
Yeah. I guess so. That's it. That's the episode. Not in a nutshell, because I think we were at our longest recording session yet. But I can't end the show without putting in some speculation and talking about where we might be going. And I just want to lead off with like whether there's a filler episode in between. We know that we're going to get to Corvus, and we know we're gonna meet Ahsoka because Bo-Katan says, "Tell her, Bo-Katan sent you." But my mind automatically goes to the periphery of who else can we meet, because I don't think Ahsoka's hiding out alone. I think if we meet Ahsoka, we're going to get at least one more character, and I'm not sure. I have three possibilities, and it could be one or it could be all of them. The first obvious one, Sabine, because you think Sabine is going to be very much aware of and very much paying attention to what's going on with her culture throughout the galaxy. The second one is Rex.
Oh yeah.
Because of the connection, Ahsoka and Rex. And Rex fought in the Battle of Endor, so there's no reason why, he wouldn't be hiding out with her or helping her hide out, stay concealed from whatever's going on.
Very true.
And the third one, now I don't remember, did he survive? Callus.
Callus goes off to the Zeb's people's new homeworld.
Right.
Stays there to help them rebuild.
Is there a chance that Callus, as an ex-Imperial, will make an appearance in The Mandalorian?
Oh, he's a really good character to it.
Somebody who flipped.
So good that it made Hux switching in the last movie just so silly.
I know, it was dumb.
It was like they were drawing from now you're ripping off your own selves. Like for me, that was a little bit cheese. Callus is a great character because I never, for the first two seasons, you don't really get that he's pulling strings on the other side at all.
I don't think that they wrote him that way I think they wrote him straight for those two seasons that he was.
He commits, and he's a broken soldier too, right?
Yeah.
Like he commits atrocities on Zeb's homeworld.
That's right. So I mean, if there's enough to drag, to get the crew back together, does he come with it?
I could see Chopper showing up in an easy periphery legacy character, and
I just assume, not only from what we saw in Rogue One, but dipping back into Star Wars Squadrons, that in Rogue One, Chopper is visible along with the Ghost, and we get that page for General Syndulla.
Yeah, he's probably with Hera.
I just assume that Chopper is with Hera wherever she's at, and we know she's around because she's on Project Starhawk.
I would do a Jason Syndulla show.
Oh yeah. Funny you should mention that, because there's more potential for another quasi Jedi-like character who could essentially keep the flame burning.
100%, and a perfect character like at the right age to pop up in a show like this.
I guess so, yeah, because I mean,
as a child, he's probably like maybe 13 or 14 at this point.
That's right, yeah. Not too far off from where Luke was when he hooked up with Obi-Wan.
Yeah, I don't. Do you think there's anything to the fact that the planet Corvus is the same title of the
Raider class Corvette?
The Raider class Corvette from the Battlefront 2 game, the one that inevitably Iden Versio steals and commandeers and becomes a rebel ship.
I'm inclined. My initial
grabbing names from the hat.
My initial thought on that is it's a throwaway. I don't think it's going to be connected. I did, read a few things, and I watched a couple of videos, and one of the videos I watched, the IGN review of the episode, actually made that same connection on the Corvus. And, the one of the possibilities was that it presents a way for Ahsoka to meet Din Djarin on her terms as opposed to his, right? Instead of giving, say, Corvus, but let's assume that Corvus is the Raider class Corvette. Well, then that gives her the upper hand because it's a ship and not a planet. And so when Din Djarin shows up in system, it gives her the opportunity to get the jump on him.
There's a theme too. Every time he meets a contact, nothing on the other end ever works out exactly the way that the person is set.
No.
So there's also that running theme of almost everybody's trying to one up every other character in the show. But
again, for a show that's based around lone wolf bounty hunter who's, seat of your pants, buy your wits, isn't that kind of pervasive and, as a theme?
Oh, absolutely. I had said at one previous episode that you didn't need to be a Star Wars fan to enjoy this, and now I don't know if it's so deep. I'm sure you can still enjoy it, but
it might not be true anymore.
It might not be true anymore. I mean, they're taking some deep turns, and I don't know if the casual viewer will. I encourage the casual viewer, if there are any of you listening to us, to dive into those other two series we've been talking about, because this is certainly the final act in a trilogy.
Very much so. I posted yesterday. I put up a little teaser for today's show with some photographs, and I shared that over to my own personal social media. And we got a comment from a former colleague of mine who's a big Star Wars fan. Like, I mean big. Like, he named his son Harrison.
Nice.
Like, he's a huge Star Wars fan. And he was completely disenchanted with what was going on to the point where he said, I've had enough. I'm not going to watch anymore. Like, referring to, Bo-Katan as a wannabe, and I'm like, I'm really sorry you feel that way. But if you're not a fan of I said, this episode really leans into the lore that was established in the two animated series. And I said, if you haven't,
he's recently disgruntled.
Like yesterday.
Whoa.
Yeah. Like, I literally watched the episode and said, I'm done. He thought Bo-Katan was a wannabe and that, Din Djarin wasn't aggressive enough with her. And I don't think he really understood the nuance of who she is and what she represents in the bigger Star Wars universe. And that's fine. I mean, that's part of what our show is really about when we talk about, fandom power. Like, your fandom, it's your thing, right? I said, really, if you can handle it, you should check out both of those series. And I said, and if you can't, because there's a lot to digest, at the very least, just go back and watch the episodes in Clone Wars and Rebels that relate to the Darksaber, because that would help.
Even YouTube summary videos.
Yeah, I mean, it would so help to fill in those gaps, because I think
if he's such a big fan, he's doing himself a disservice by not having that content. I thought you meant that he was out having seen that other content and was
No, I mean, like, this was his reaction to this episode, which I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? There's a good chance that he would probably do that too. Anyway, that's kind of my thoughts on going forward. Andy, what about you? You got anything you think is going to go on?
Nothing that hasn't already been covered.
No. Okay. How about you, Hank?
So from the trailer, since we've been getting successive images of things going on, I think that we may have another episode before we get to Corvus, and I think it may be that rocky world from the trailer where there are the speeder bikes and the new ties. And certainly we've seen live action footage of Gideon. I'm not sure if that was from old footage or not, but I think we might get him coming to head with the Empire first.
Sure.
And then maybe have to limp for it. He does repeatedly need help.
He sure does.
In a completely honest way. I'm going to cross my fingers for Ahsoka next episode.
Yep.
But I think that we're going to have to wait a little longer.
I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that the Rocky environment the Rocky set piece that we see in the trailer is back to Navarro.
I tend to agree, actually.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be interesting.
We've also seen those characters in the.
That's right. the shot of Grief Karga in his new outfit,
Cara
alongside
Dune.
with Cara Dune, and they're clearly hanging out together. I assume that they're still on Navarro. I can't see why Carl Weathers' character would leave, especially if the immediacy of the Imperial threat has now been dealt with.
Certainly, and in those scenes, the child is nowhere to be found, and we know that sometimes he leaves him on the ship, and sometimes he leaves him with the babysitter. There's that running theme too, but I don't think a more tragic thing could happen to that character than to actually lose the child and then have to be operating from a place of offense rather than defense. Yeah. I think that would be a neat turn, and I think you might see that this season.
It's entirely possible, especially when you start adding in these other, we'll call them legacy characters that are making the leap from animation into live action. I mean, we're going to have to put the gang together, and if we're going to do it, we got Ahsoka. I mean, if we're going to get Ahsoka, I'm hoping, at this point, I'm really, really hoping that we can get Tamura to do Rex. I would love to see Rex visualized as a live action character. 100%. Get the band back together kind of thing. And, Bo-Katan for the cherry on top.
It's true. There are endless possibilities, and I feel really comfortable with who's at the helm. And I feel strongly that they understand that fans are fans of this. Yeah. And that they do have a deep box to draw from, and they've so far so good, man.
Oh my God, yeah. So I guess I'm going to go one more time and just again suggest that we're going to see not a morality, but an ideological shift in the main character himself. And I reassert that at some point of his own volition, the helmet will come off.
My favorite episode so far out of all 11.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I love the Marshal. I was on the fence with the passenger until successive viewings, at which case I turned a leaf over on that and said, no, I really like it for its development pieces. And then this episode comes along and just blows it out of the water. So much action, so much lore, but doesn't ignore the character development that came before it, and even maybe adds a little more.
Katie Sackhoff, marry me.
All right, guys. I think that's it for me. And I hope everybody's enjoying the show. Stay with us. We've got 5 more weeks to go. And it's been a wild ride so far. So that's it, guys. Until next week, may the Force be with you.
Also with you.
This is the way.
Hey, guys. Thanks for listening to Fandom Power. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll be talking about another one of your favorite fandoms. Fandom Power is a Sawcast production.